author-producer of the Carving Turns Made Easy series of books and videos. In the 1990s, when I was still coaching regularly at Green Mountain Valley School, the ski racing academy, I experimented with shaped skis as soon as they became available and developed an unusual new approach to help racers learn to carve. I found the drills I developed so effective on my own skiing and that of GMVS racers that I tested them on younger racers and recreational skiers right down to athletic beginners. When they worked well with minor modification at those levels, I decided to make my first video and book to promote my approach to instruction, which takes advantage of shaped skis to introduce carving early. With very little advertising, I've sold thousands of these and heard from hundreds of excited people who have used them to transform their skiing or to improve their coaching. One might well ask why I'm now producing my third video on carving turns. It's partly because I need to replace my second book and video, both called Carving Quick Turns Made Easy, which have been rendered obsolete by about 3 years of rapid change in slalom equipment and technique. Not only do I need to correct the information on slalom turn skiing that I put out, but I'd like to introduce to the skiing public the recent changes that have taken the shape ski revolution to a whole new level. Also with this video, I'd like to show people my new shape ski oriented approach to introducing a novice skier not just to carve turn skiing, but later to racing, and demonstrate how easy that can be. I'm going to do this by having my friend Piero demonstrate with me not only how I taught him to ski, but then actually teach him how to run gates for the first time for the camera. After showing you how to learn in this way, there will be a section on why this approach works so well to produce great skiing. This section includes an analysis of some wonderful footage of Olympic racing by Janica and Ivica Kostelic. In 2003, the world's best male and female models for technical racing and carving. The last third of the video will show you how to develop your racing technique to higher levels. This section will be illustrated by examples from the training of the Green Mountain Valley School, as well as more Olympic racing. The shaped skis that first got racers' attention in the 1990s were 190 to 200 centimeter giant slalom skis. They gradually transformed racer skiing and also had some impact on recreational skiing. But the majority of recreational skiers didn't feel comfortable carving the high-speed, full trail width GS turns that these skis produced. With the introduction of very short slalom skis and the rapid changes in technique that has followed, you can now carve in tighter, steeper, and more crowded places at slower speeds than before. That makes carving far more useful, fun, and accessible to the average athletic skier. For example, learning to carve on short, shaped skis can now turn icy boulevard trails that many people used to hate into enjoyable playgrounds. The development of short shaped skis also makes it easier than before to develop the excellent carving basics from which you can most easily build other forms of great skiing, like powder, extreme skiing, and even mogul skiing. And learning to carve has gotten easier. Now World Cup racers use virtually the same GS-type turn for almost all their carving, including their slalom turns. The complex, independent leg action techniques that I taught 3 years ago have nearly vanished from racing. To have sound carving basics, there's now really only one carved turn to learn. Fortunately for me, the gorilla turn at the core of my instructional approach leads directly and quite easily to this core World Cup turn. To help you understand all this and prepare you to try my approach, I need to demonstrate how I go about teaching someone to carve. Before you learn to carve, it's important to understand how a ski makes an arc. If you edge an unpressured ski, only the tip and tail will touch the snow. However, relatively light pressure will bend one of today's soft carving skis, and at speed, as you turn, centrifugal force will always bend the ski out more and more until the ski's whole carving edge is supported by the snow. If the edging is slight, the ski can hardly bend and won't turn very sharply at all. If it's edged a lot, it will bend a lot and provide a tight arc. In other words, you control the radius of your arcs more by the amount of edging you create than by the amount of pressure you add. And to understand carved turns and be able to control them, you need to learn big edging. You can do a great deal to prepare yourself to learn how to carve arcs before you ever try them on snow with this indoor position drill. Stand between benches in the gorilla turn starting position. Skis about 2 feet apart, knees quite bent, butt low, and a little bit back like a gorilla. Picture yourself on a flat trail which heads down that way. Now you want to get into a position for starting the next turn, somewhere over there. To start the turn, you need to roll your skis up onto edge, using your whole leg as a lever. This means twisting your hips down to the inside of the new turn. As you twist your hips in, shuffle your inside foot forward a little to allow the hip to twist. You want your outside leg to straighten out quite a bit. To maintain some outside foot pressure, bow your head and shoulders out toward your outside foot, like this. As the turn starts, try to increase edging even more by adding some knee angulation. As the ski starts to arc, centrifugal force will load up your outside leg, and you can tilt to the inside to stay in balance. Use your inside leg for support. Now I'd like to introduce my friend Piero, who's going to help demonstrate the on-snow drills that I taught him. When I made this video, Piero had skied the equivalent of about 1 winter of regular weekly skiing. He is a talented, conservatory-trained musical conductor and is also my video editor. He is naturally strong and quite fearless, but he never thought of himself as an athlete. And the idea of the countered wedge is just to teach you a body position, to teach you how to swing your hips in and bow out a little bit toward the outside ski. And that's basically all you have to worry about as you do this little wedge turn. It's just to teach you that move where the hip twists a little and swings across toward the inside ski or away from the outside ski, and you just bow out a little bit. And that is called counter rotation, because you're swinging your hips in a direction that's counter to the direction that you actually want to turn. We want to turn this way, but the hips actually face you away a little bit from the direction that you're turning in. Bow out, hip in a little, that's it. Okay, good. Piero, why don't you go in front of me this time, and I'll watch what you're doing and coach you from behind. Okay, bow out and hip in, that's it. Now hips across, bow to the outside, that's it. Very good. Bow out, hip in, very good. And bow out and hip in. You can think of it as bowing toward the snowballs. Bow to the snowballs. Bow to the edge of the trail. Very good. Okay, Piero, good job with the countered wedge. Now we're ready to move on with the carved wedge. So your focus is going to be a little bit more on what goes on under your skis and on your ski edging. And it's your outside, or your left ski in this case, that's going to do the carving, and it's the inside ski that is going to do the wedging, because we want to get this outside ski just to go in a nice straight line and then develop some pressure on it and get as much edging as you can. And the edging comes from twisting your hip in so that your outside leg comes down and puts the ski way up on edge. Let's see you have a go at that. That's right. Hip well in, that's good. Big edging on that ski. Use your shoulders out here to get a little bit of pressure on it. That's good. Excellent. Very good. Excellent. Now we're going to link some. Okay, Piero, the next thing we're going to work on is the gorilla turn. And this is probably the key turn of the whole system. If you can do a decent gorilla turn, you're capable of making a pretty darn good racing turn. So in this turn, the skis are going to be parallel, and you're going to get in the same basic position that we've been talking about. Your hip's going to come in, and as it comes in, it twists, and you allow that inside ski to slide ahead a little bit. And you try to get as much edging on the outside ski as you can by lowering your hips so that the whole leg acts like a lever to put the ski up on edge. And then you bow out just a little bit to get the pressure on the outside ski. It's a lot easier to do in a turn when you get some centrifugal force holding you out against the ski than it is to do standing still. So why don't you try to get into that position now, see how that goes. Okay? Now move your butt away from me and twist it. That's it. Very good. And don't hunch over too much. Just bow a little bit out toward this ski so you're going to get your pressure a little bit on that ski. And it's okay to slide this one ahead just a little to allow you to get down. Very nice. Very good. Okay. Maybe get your butt just a little lower and just a little more radical. But let's. Use this indoor transition drill to help you understand how to move between turns. Now, let's pretend that you're coming out of a previous turn. In this position, with your hips to the inside, bowing out toward the outside ski a little. To end the turn, flatten the skis by moving your hips across over your skis into the gorilla stance. To start the next turn, keep the hips twisting across your skis. Allow your feet to shuffle and bow out a little. Now you've made a transition from one turn to the next. next turn we're going to work on is the tuck turn. And the main purpose of the tuck turn is that it shows you an effective way how to move your butt back and forth across the skis between turns. But it's many of the same movements that we've already been working on. So get your feet pretty far apart and get down in a tuck. It doesn't have to be real low, but this is good. And then swing your butt away from me and swing your hands to the outside over that outside ski up toward me. And that gives you another sample of how that body moves across the ski. You want to be sure to slide your right foot ahead enough so that this outside leg straightens out a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Here we go. Okay, Piero, the next thing we're going to work on is getting the position right of the inside leg in the turn. In your gorilla turn, the inside leg is flat, the inside ski is flat on the snow, and the outside ski is carving, and you have kind of an A-frame position that's like this. Now we have to change and improve that and get the inside ski to match the outside ski. Angles and leg angles coming up off of them. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start out making gorilla turns, and you're going to do experiments with picking up your inside ski, getting really good balance on the outside ski by keeping your body out over it a little bit properly, and that'll improve your balance on the outside ski, and it will also start the process of getting the inside ski in the right position. Okay, Piero, now we're going to do matched gorilla turns, and what the object is to get you having both skis parallel and the leg angles matched as well. So what I want you to do is either go into the turn with your skis about this wide apart and try to put them both on edge at the same time, the same amount, or another approach would be to pick up the inside ski like you did for the previous drill and put it down, but you can do it either way. So here we go. Another drill that we need to do now is the up-down gorilla turn. Gorilla turns tend to stay down with your butt low, and the purpose of that is just to make sure that you're down enough so that you get the big edge angles from having your butt low and to the inside. But as you ski more, and ski more like a World Cup skier, there are a lot of times when you need to come up a little bit between turns so that you can come back down to create pressure for the next turn. So all this drill really is gorilla turns, but as you come out of the turn and you're in your gorilla turn, you push against the snow and come up at the same time. And then you're up and then you're floating a little bit and a little bit light. And then you start the next gorilla turn and you bring your butt back down into the inside as far as you dare. So it's a movement going into the next turn that's like dropping the hand, dropping the butt, getting that ski bent. In this explanation to Piero, I didn't mention the second and third reasons for this up-down drill. When turns get very back and forth, as they often do on the steep, a racer needs to know how to come up to unweight his skis and pivot them into the turn with minimal weighted skidding before landing on them and carving the bottom of his turn. Coming up can also make it easier to get forward in this situation. The timing of my up-down movements in this drill gets better and better as I approach the bottom. The idea is to time the extension and float so that I land on my skis for the new turn when they are already out from under my hips and ready for a little extra downforce to pressure the edges and bend the skis. That also allows me to continue the down movement of my hips to increase edging and tighten the turn. Don't try your carve turns on steeper trails until you can carve powerfully on the flat in a consistently strong and stable stance with confidence. When you do move up to steeper terrain, do it by small increments. For instance, consider starting only 2 turns up from a flat to limit speed. Here I am with Piero talking about making first turns on steeper terrain. Okay, Piero, we're going to do our first gorilla turns now on a steeper pitch. And they're just exactly the same as what you're doing before, but you've got to remember that the loads are going to be a little bit greater. It's going to be more powerful, so you've got to make sure that you have that straight, firm outside leg. And when you feel the pressure come on, just resist it firmly, okay? And the usual, try to get that inside leg to bend so that you get a pretty powerful turn. And we'll just do 2 or 3 turns in a row so the speed doesn't build too much. But if you feel like you're getting out of control and you want to stop, do it. Okay, let's have it go. I should add here that it's important not to sit back over your outside ski in a powerful turn. If you do bend that outside knee a lot to sit, your quads may easily collapse under the load, putting your knee ligaments at risk. I'm trying to get my hips well in and forward. When I feel my outside ski bending, I push back against the pressure and try to increase edging by dropping hips even further. Let the ski carve well around so that you come out of the fall line in each turn to control your speed. If you have good strength in relation to your weight and are adventurous, you will soon love the speed and accuracy and power that you experience carving turns on intermediate terrain. Always make sure that you have a completely clear slope, both ahead and behind, before you start. Now Piero is ready for a new challenge, running through a giant slalom mushroom course. Why try them? They're just fun, and you don't have to run gates against the clock to enjoy them. You can treat them as an accuracy challenge to see if you can ski a prescribed course with clean, accurate carved turns next to each gate as they whiz by. For people that like to compete, they're even more fun. Either way, the gates can do great things for your skiing, perfect your carving, make your turns tighter and more dynamic, increase your confidence and reliability at speed, and help you learn to look ahead. Okay, Piero, this is your first time skiing gates, and sometimes gates can considerably add to the confusion because there are a lot of things to think about at once. You've got the gate, you've got your line, and you've got your technique, and a person is only really able to concentrate on one or two things at once. And when it's first time, it's usually only one thing. So the main focus should be on technique. And you can use the gate as kind of a cue for your technique. You should be telling yourself, okay, drop the hip in toward the gate as you approach it, and get the ski up on edge, get your upper body out away from the gate as you approach it, so that you're in balance, but you got good edging. And that gate will tell you, or will remind you that that's what you need to do. Another thing I should mention, just to help your confidence, is that we've set up these gates exactly on the turns that we were making in the drills. So in fact, you'll be running a course that you've been running already without the gates there. So I expect you won't have a great deal of trouble with it, even though it's the first time you've ever run gates. And we'll slide down there and talk about that a little bit more as we go. Okay, first of all, this is the first gate, and the line is, you got to come out in about here, probably over the tips of your skis, and have the turn complete right about in there. Don't try to get too close to the gate, okay? The other thing I should mention is that the first turn tends to be a little bit awkward because you don't have your speed up yet, and you don't have the centrifugal force to push you out against the ski to get it bent as well. The people that made these turns were about on the right line. There's a pretty good curve up here and goes slightly outside of the gate, comes around. The turn is nearly complete as the person passed the gate, so that he's almost aimed for his next turn on the gate below. Here we go. All right, very good, no problem. I would say get a little bit lower, feet a little bit further apart, and just try to load it up just a little more, but the snow will only support so much. Looks like your right foot turns are a little more powerful because you get the skis out from under you better. So on your turns on the left foot, make sure that your feet are adequately apart to allow you to get this foot out from under you. And hold your head out a little bit for the balance. Years ago, after a few successful experiments with teaching carving to novices on very flat beginner hills, I decided that skidding drills should not be the sole focus of early instruction, because the skidding often led to bad habits. I began to wonder idly if skiers who learned to sideslip just enough to get onto the beginner hill and then learn to carve starting with my countered wedge would just naturally learn enough more about skidding to be safe when ready to try carving on steeper trails. Then, soon after, one of my students, emboldened by his carving experiences on novice trails, tried to carve down a black diamond trail. He quickly realized that he didn't feel secure carving arcs at 40 miles an hour, but also that he didn't really know how to skid or stop at that speed either. Being highly motivated, he saved his bacon and mine by learning very quickly how to carve turns at racing speed and coming to a stop when the trail got flat. I decided right then to add some very specific defensive skiing drills to my progression to be mastered just before venturing above the beginner hill. Novices are often handicapped in learning to pole plant because they don't understand at all how they are done. Here's how good free skiers and racers normally use a single pole plant. The pole is planted somewhat point forward. The handle rises on an arc as the skier approaches where the point went into the snow. The skier can lean on this rising handle as necessary to help him unweight, and once unweighted, to pivot his body and skis to help initiate a turn that is too tight to be fully carved. The double pole plant is one in which both poles are planted at once. It usually involves a quite light touch and is used to encourage coming forward out of a turn and to make minor corrections of body position and balance during the transition between turns. Double pole plants are common in racing today because heavy point-forward single pole plants can slow you. Also, there is a reduced need for prolonged unweight, since most turns don't require pivoting the skis now. I'm always looking for ways to use dryland drills to develop moves to be used later on snow. The idea here is to give yourself the experience of planting your pole point forward ahead of you as you run, and of feeling the handle lift as you approach it. By leaning on this lifting pole handle in a controlled way, you can use the pole to help you rise up and unweight a little. Okay, another drill that would be useful to do before you get on snow is a little bit of rehearsal of how to plant your poles. And what you can get out of this drill is the idea on a single pole plant to plant your pole ahead of you, and then as you move up past it, get some lift out of it. And then you plant the next one and get some lift out of it, and you just get the rhythm going. So here we go. To further develop your single pole plants on snow, start out by making very slow wedge turns or skidded parallel turns on flat terrain. Most plants are made about a third to a half of the way between turns, just where you might need a little unweight and pivot for the next turn. When you can plant consistently at slow speed on the flat, start pole planting for every turn you make. When you start to use pole plants on the steep, for controlled, tight, skidded turns, or in bumps, you will begin to realize just how useful they can be. You can also practice your double pole plants before you get on snow. This is a movement that the top World Cup skiers use these days, and it helps them to get their arms forward coming out of each turn. Some skiers may be tempted not to learn how to pole plant, thinking that it's becoming passé in racing. However, some pole planting will probably always be necessary for getting through very tight, steep slalom courses with consistency. Furthermore, your free skiing in bumps on steeps or off-piste requires sound pole planting for unweighting and pivoting, safety, consistency, and control. Skidding drills are not dead. It's proper that carving is an important focus in ski instruction currently because arc carving is revolutionizing skiing. That doesn't mean that carving is everything. Plenty of recreational skiers are very happy making relaxed, elegant, skidded check turns while enjoying the beauty of the mountains in winter. That's good. Furthermore, in the bumps or off-piste, a subtly modulated skid or gentle edging to avoid sinking in powder may be just what's called for. I use as few skidding drills as possible to initiate skidding skill development. Just side slipping, garlands, and check turns. The one section of my second video, Carving Quick Turns Made Easy, that has not been affected significantly by changes in slalom skis, covers these drills effectively. To save repeating what was already done well, I'm including that one section from the old video here. Drill set 4, skidding drills. I teach carving skills ahead of skidding skills to implant the most critical skiing skill early. Furthermore, as I teach carving, using angulated wedge drills, my students learn enough about skidding to get around the beginner trails safely. I only take time to refine their skidding skills when they've developed a sound carving stance and are ready to test it on steeper trails and need skidding skills for safety and control. There are 3 skidding drills in my progression. 1. Side slipping and checking to teach edging basics. 2. Garlands to teach pivoting skills. 3. Check turns for controlled turning on the steep. Almost anybody can make it down a steep trail if they learn how to side slip and learn how to check a side slip by setting the edges. Move your knees down the slope to get your skis sliding. Move your knees up the hill to edge when you want to stop sliding. When you set your edges, you should plant your downhill pole to help you catch your balance. Once you have straight down side slipping under control, you can experiment with the effect leaning forward or leaning back has on the way your skis behave while they are skidding. Normally, if you lean forward while skidding on edge skis, the tips, being pressured, will sink into the snow and hold better than the tails, and the tails will skid around. You can augment any rotation of the ski by twisting your knees and ankles as well. The next skidding drill is garlands. The garland drill is a series of little skidded turns into and out of the fall line, working down and across a trail. Garlands exercise a number of rotary skidding skills, including pole plants,
and forward and back movements to control skidded pivoting. Learn garlands in 3 stages. First, start down the hill at a 45-degree traverse and use an uphill pole plant to pivot your heels downhill. Then check your skid by locking your knees and hips in. Forward stance accelerates the pivoting. Rocking back helps lock the heels to check the pivot. Next, learn how to do a slow, very flat traverse and then plant your downhill pole. Extend to dive toward the fall line. Try linking several of these turns together to create a garland track across the hill.
Check turns are what you would do if you wanted to ski in control on a steep, narrow place like a chute. You set the edge in a check turn just like you set the edge in a garland. With tip pressure, the heels of Alex's skis skid and pivot around out of the fall line. Then the edges are abruptly locked in to check the skid, and the downhill pole is planted point forward with her forearm turned out. Pole lifts and pivots Alex and her skis into the fall line with the help of a big leg extension. Once you've learned check turns that skid around completely out of the fall line, you can then learn to lessen the skid and lock your edges in earlier in each turn. The earlier edge set here projects me more across the hill. Racers try to eliminate the skidding check entirely, even on very steep terrain. To learn that, start with check turns and then try to restrict the skidding to the early part of the turn. Then try to eliminate all skid. I consider minimizing skidding for very steep, tight turns an endless, ongoing project for myself. Quick turn carving drills. There's really very little new to learn. Most World Cup slalom turns are just GS turns on short skis, linked very quickly. First step to learning to generate carved slalom turns is to switch to slalom racing skis of minimum FIS approved length and let them teach you how to carve tighter turns. Here, neither Piero nor I had skied on skis quite this short. I'm trying to get used to mine, first by carving as sharp turns as I can make. When those begin to feel powerful, I try to link them more and more quickly. I'm trying to get my hips low and to the inside with a straightish outside leg early in each turn, and keep my legs apart so that the skis are levered onto edge quickly to give me power early. To be able to link such turns quickly, I find it useful to stay a little low, even between turns, so that I'm always in the ready position for creating big edging. On the other hand, I am aware that in a low stance where my butt must be behind my inside ski boot in one turn, I have to work hard to get my hips forward enough over that same ski for the next turn. Some runs, I focus on getting forward by bringing my arms and shoulders forward coming out of each turn, or by trying to be conscious of outside ski tip pressure in each turn. My gorilla turn training pretty well guarantees a reasonably calm vertical upper body that helps to minimize excess movements from turn to turn. For these high-force turns, I'm careful not to use much knee angulation in an attempt to link turns even more quickly. I am careful not to have both knees bent when the skis are loaded up. Excessive knee angulation in turns this powerful is dangerous. I stop at the bottom of each run to consider what I did and to plan the next run. If tracks are visible, I look at them to see how clean my skiing has been. The truth is, I'm trying to do in one day to prepare myself for slalom gates that should be given weeks. I must focus to get the most out of each run. Meanwhile, Piero has been thriving on his quick new skis. He loves them.
he is at first focused on skiing powerfully on them, and his turns already look more confident and powerful than his turns the day before. I talked to him very briefly about keeping his hips low, getting forward, and planning his poles. He is skiing well, time is running out, and after his GS mushroom success, I'm anxious to video his first slalom mushroom experience. Here is Piero ready to run his first slalom course. I have set as simple a slalom mushroom course as possible, one with the gates all offset the same and the same distance apart. Piero should try to hold on to his powerful low-hip GS-style carving technique in this slalom rhythm course. He should use the mushrooms as cues for getting his hips in over them, forward and down close to them. He should try to make quick transitions between turns. He should keep his upper body more or less vertical while he extends his legs from side to side. When you try this, make sure your feet are apart more than a foot. Get your arcs very clean. Try some runs focusing on pole plants. After a lot of runs, working on your technique, start to focus on pushing firmly against your skis to generate speed. With technique and mushrooms improving, focus for a while on your line through the mushrooms. Study your tracks. The line issues are similar to those for GS. Are you passing each mushroom with much of your direction change already completed? Are your skis running close to the mushrooms and your upper body in over the top of them? Piero has done really well here. Learning to carve arcs with my approach really did produce a technique that was not only very useful in a GS mushroom course, it was easily adapted after an hour of skiing on short skis to running slalom as well. I know that Piero feels that the few intense hours spent up front learning initially awkward positions and movements turned out to be time extremely well spent. As you see, for a skier of one winter's experience, he skis extremely well. Furthermore, because his basics are sound, every turn that he makes in response to future skiing challenges will just make him better. You can already see how his responses to gates has improved his skiing.
I started out by showing you how my system works. Now I'd like to show you why it works so well. To do that, let's start by looking at the skiing of a couple of the best ski racers in the world. The Olympic champion, Janica Kostelic, and her brother Ivica, World Cup slalom champion.
She prepares for her next turn by getting into a low stance with her feet wider apart than her hips. Does this look familiar? She swings her hips inward, ahead, and down until the outside leg straightens. She allows her inside ski to shuffle ahead a little as her hips twist in. She bows a little toward her outside ski for balance. This keeps her upper body fairly vertical. Her butt is nearly hitting the snow. Her outside ski has been levered way up on the edge so that it can bend. The centrifugal force against the outside ski is huge, but her outside leg resists it easily because her leg bones are in line and centered over the ski. Now the problem is to unbend the ski and gradually end the turn. Her inside leg raises her hips and they start to move back over her skis. The skis flatten onto the snow, unbend, and run straighter. She is low over her skis with both knees bent and her feet slightly wider than her hips. Her hips keep swinging across her skis and start to fall inward, forward and down, to lever her skis up onto edge. As she approaches the gate, she starts to bow toward her outside ski tip for balance and to help her head and inside arm to clear the gate. Her outside leg straightens out completely to increase pressure as her hips drop very close to the snow. The ski is bent into a very tight arc. She brings her hips up over her skis to gradually flatten them and end the turn. Can you see how a focus on hips can clarify and simplify movements for you? Hips swing away from the outside ski, forward and down to initiate and tighten the turn. Hips swing up and back over the skis and across them to end it and then start the next turn. Notice what Janitsa's inside leg is doing here. It is bent beyond 90 degrees to allow her hips to get down this far. Her butt is, of necessity, well behind the center of her inside ski, and a coach viewing her from the inside of the turn might think of her as sitting too far back. But she is forward in relation to her outside ski, and this low butt position is the key to big edging of the outside ski, hence to turning power. And there's no way to achieve it without sitting back some in relation to the inside ski. Janitsa minimizes the sitting back aspect of her inside leg position by pulling her inside foot back as far as her boot cuff stiffness allows, and bows forward and reaches ahead with her arms as she pulls herself up and forward for the next turn. Notice that the legs are wide apart throughout. Going into the turn, they are wide apart to help get the outside ski on edge early. At the turn's apex, they're wide apart to prevent the inside boot or ski from knocking into the outside boot or leg and dislodging the outside ski from its track. Although the smooth, coordinated flow and amplitude of Janitsa's movements are extraordinary, the similarities between the product of my gorilla turn drills and Janitsa's turns are also evident. The turns start from similar positions. The turn apex positions mainly differ in how far the hips drop to create leg angles and edging. Now let's take a quick look at some world-class slalom skiing. Here is an Olympic run of the 2002 World Cup slalom champion Ivica Kostelic. Here is Ivica between two gates on the upper flat. Does this low butt, wide stance position look familiar? Notice the straight outside leg and bent inside leg here. Also the bent outside ski. He comes up part way to bring his hips over his skis. His hips drop inward to edge and bend the ski for the next turn. As you see, the hips stay low to provide prompt ski bend for each turn. The outside leg straightens out for each power phase as well. Also, with the exception of the first gate, the skis remain parallel rather than splitting as he comes out of the turns to create skating step type moves. In other words, there's very little independent leg action. These are mini GS turns, similar to the turns produced by my drills, and also to the GS turns of his sister that we just showed you. When the average skier or even ski instructor sees me working with someone on the hill, he often has a hard time understanding what I'm trying to do. Positions I'm trying to encourage at first look awkward and hard to achieve. These people don't understand that the key to carve turn skiing is not just carving, it is bending the ski and carving in the strongest possible stance. Learning to do that efficiently requires the low hips, big edging, and the straight outside leg of a gorilla turn type drill, not gentle experiments with knee angulation. In the beginning, my approach looks awkward. A few hours later, I usually see fledgling World Cup skiing. All drills are designed to help you experience some aspect of an advanced move. They always involve compromise. The gorilla turns in my drills are racing turns modified a little to make them easier to do at slow speed. The inside leg and ski is used to support your hips slightly, while you experiment with edging and pressuring your outside ski. The inside ski runs flat on the snow, skidding slightly with little or no pressure on it. The main compromise in a gorilla turn stance then is the inside ski runs flat on the snow, skidding slightly with little or no pressure on it. The main compromise in a gorilla turn stance, then, is that the shins are not parallel, but somewhat A-framed. Once you've experienced the powerful carves provided by gorilla turns, promptly moving into matching drills will banish the A-frame. At slow speed, gorilla turns do require a pretty extreme angulation and counter-rotation. Extreme positions are a very good way to teach yourself their basic concept. As you begin to carve turns at higher speed, less extreme angulation is required to provide adequate edging with good balance, and you can use less extreme positions. Why take the gorilla turn approach then? It promptly gives you an experience of tight arc carving at fairly slow speed in a useful approximation of a World Cup stance. Skidded turn bad habits like tilting in and rotating are almost impossible. You will get excited by the powerful turns, do some polishing drills, and your skiing will be transformed. All that's required to get you started is a full commitment by you to try new positions and moves for a few hours.
I think a lot of people don't think they want to ski like a racer. They think racers ski faster than they would like to go. They suspect that skiing like a racer would be a showy, sweaty affectation that would spoil their appreciation of their mountain experience. The only problem I have with that attitude is that maybe quite a few of the more athletic of such people might actually enjoy carving stable, clean, relaxed swoops at slow slalom racer speed on medium flat boulevard trails if they really knew how. Even if they didn't like to go that fast, I still think that learning to carve on the absolute flat would be the best way for them to develop great basics for the kind of elegant skiing they would like.
As you saw, it was easy to introduce Piero to the simple GS mushroom course. That was because his basic carving skills were sound. Normally, I would have Piero practice each stage more before he moved on to the next challenge, but a tight shooting schedule demanded we test him soon in regular GS panels. Piero forced the pace further by running this course before I had a chance to program him. Because the course was tighter than the mushroom course, and because poles can create unanticipated problems, he had trouble making it through. After a couple of tries, I slid through the course with him to discuss line and technique in GS panels.
Do your first turn out here so that you're already going this way as you pass the pole, and try then to do the same for the next one. So come wide. Make sure you come across the hill enough so that you can complete your turn close to that next blue. Here he goes.
Piero made it through the course fairly easily, but he was still getting lower and lower in relation to each gate as he moved down it.
All right.
The getting too low in a course problem is a common one for inexperienced racers. At first, Piero didn't aim himself quite high enough as he came out of each turn. As he approached this gate, you can see that his skis were slightly downhill from my carve marks. Perhaps he had overestimated how tight an arc he can carve. He also hadn't gotten his hips low and to the inside enough to carve an arc as tight as mine. At this point, he was bound to come out of the turn too low. I should add that once Piero's ski is edged and loaded up, he should continue to drop his hips and press even harder against the ski to bend it further. Each of Piero's runs gets better as he learns on his own how to edge and load up his outside ski more firmly with better timing. Coming out of a turn, you should look down at the whole course below to form an image of what the next arc needs to be. Then you should look over to the next gate and figure out exactly where on the snow your outside ski should initiate the next turn. And then try to get your hips low and forward early for big edging at the proper angle right at that spot. We saw that at first Piero started his turns too late and came out of his turns too low. Some racers start their turns too early. Strangely enough, such a racer also comes out of each turn too low. That's because he can't usually bend his outside ski to use the early part of his turn to start changing direction. When he gets to the gate, he is still aimed to the outside of the course. Another line problem is aiming too high across the hill coming out of each turn. On firm racing snow, there's nothing slower than traversing at a high angle and carving a gentle big round arc. As your skiing gets more powerful so that you can carve tight arcs, experiment with running lower and straighter between turns and getting your hips down to create your tightest arcs.
I'd like to show you how we use helper gates to help beginning racers to learn their line. We've placed this helper gate directly above the turning pole that we have below us to indicate where your turn has to start. And essentially what you're going to be doing is starting to get your edging right about here, just above the helper gate, in order to be able to make an arc that goes out a little bit away from the gate and carves in under it so that the turn is nearly complete by the time you get to the poles down there. And that will set you up to run the next helper gate all the way down there.
Helpers sometimes frustrate and confuse a racer. Some racers find that focusing on the helpers inhibits developing big leg angles and power. Ideally, each racer's first experiences in gates would establish a sound sense of line before helper gates become necessary. Kids who start running gates before they know how to carve often learn to skid the tops of their turns and then compensate for the skid by turning too early. For most turns, this is a bad habit, one that's not easily broken once they learn how to carve. I think you can see that line can have a huge effect on technique. A too high or too early turn can rob your arcs of power, turn after turn. Sometimes what appears to be a technique problem may be corrected just by getting the line right. Here's the skiing of Janica Kostelic, the Olympic champion, to help illustrate some technique issues special to gates. Notice that she counter-rotates her shoulders to help her to reach across her body to clear GS gates. Rotating as you approach a gate can put your arm inside the pole, an invitation to much pain and suffering. Make sure that you don't duck gates, that is, contract your body rapidly at the gate to avoid hitting it hard. A sudden enough duck can start a skid. One of the first questions I always ask myself about a racer's technique is, do his hips get forward and well down? These days, a lot of racers can carve their turns, but can they carve really tight turns linked by straight traverses? How low the hips get determines whether they can or not. Here are two racers from a major Eastern U.S. race, a first seed racer and a late running racer. There's nothing all that wrong with the stance of this late running racer other than not getting his body down to the inside enough to create big edging. He may not get down partly because he doesn't leave enough room between his skis and the gate to allow big leg angles. I want my meaning to be clear when I talk about the value of low hips, though. When I urge getting the hips down, I always mean get them down close to the snow, but also forward in relation to the heavily loaded outside ski, so that the outside leg is fairly straight and centered over that ski. Here is a racer making the mistake of bending and knee angulating the outside leg while the ski is still loaded up. I think of this as sitting back in relation to the outside ski. If the ski loaded up a bit more at this moment, he might fully collapse back and put his knee at risk. In contrast, this collegiate champion doesn't allow his outside leg to bend much until most of the load is off, when the turn is complete. Work on making your transitions between turns very smooth so that the downhill ski doesn't hook up the hill abruptly to slow you down as you set up the next turn. Here are the runs of two racers in the same race. The first runner, Darren Rolfs, made beautiful smooth transitions between powerful turns. The second runner's turns were not as powerful at the gate, but he compensated for that by using a bent ski at the end of his turns to abruptly launch himself up the hill to get back onto his high line for the next gate. This created a hook transition, which is usually slow. Darren made the podium here. Check video of your skiing with your coach to see if you need to work on getting your skis parallel in your turns. A reverse wedge like this one can create a lot of drag. Sooner or later, courses get rutted. Before a novice racer enters a USSA race, he needs to learn how to run ruts. With no previous race record, he will have to run late in the running order, often in ruts. Start running ruts in simple, flat GS courses. Ruts are usually grooves in the snow, 1 or 2 feet wide, where the racers seated better than you made their arcs. Sometimes there is ice in the bottom of them. Sometimes they are rippled with chatter marks. Sometimes they come up somewhat abruptly at their lower end to form a sharp launching ramp for the unwary. In almost all situations, the smoothest entry into the rut is at its top. It virtually never pays to try to ski a line between rut and gate, because the top of the turn will be weak, and you'll probably wind up skidding sideways into the depths of the rut or hitting the gate hard. In general, it pays to turn hard on a high outside line, on the outer bank, in the upper portion of the rut, at full leg extension. Cut across toward the inside of the rut before its bottom if you can, and then relax a little to ease pressure just before the bottom lip launches you. What does not work in skiing ruts is to ski unaggressively. If your hips don't get down, forward, and inward to create big edging, chatter marks will throw you sideways into a skid toward the outer bank, which could then trip you. This racer doesn't get her feet out from under her and edged powerfully in this gate, and her skis skid and get thrown around by the bumps. This racer gets her skis out from under her and has a smoother but more powerful ride.
When you can ski fairly flat courses comfortably, with good technique, start skiing ones that have steeper sections. Be sure to get plenty of direction for the steeps, where gates are usually more offset. If the gates are very offset, you may not be able to bend your skis enough to completely carve each turn. In such a situation, you need to come up to unweight and then pivot your skis going into the turn and carve the rest of it. The force of gravity helps to pull your body down into the turn to get your direction change started. Then you can come down on the edge ski with extra force to help you carve the bottom of the turn.
Varied terrain. This means skiing courses set over rolls and hollows. Rolls and hollows add significantly to the GS skiing challenge. To prepare yourself to run gates in terrain, get some mileage turning over bumps and rolls free skiing. Then you need to get yourself some courses in varied terrain. Bumps and rolls affect how your skis arc. If you make a powerful carved turn at the bottom of a horizontal hollow, The turning pressure is increased by centrifugal forces created by the hollow of the terrain. Your ski may bend into a tighter arc than you anticipate, because its center may be able to bend farther than normal before it's supported by the dished surface. Beware, make sure to keep your outside leg fairly straight and centered over the ski. You can also distribute more of the load to the inside ski or depower the turn a little by bringing your hips up. To run a gate on a knoll, one is tempted to get a lot of direction, like this line, and then load up the skis to arc the top of the turn before you get launched by the bump.
This often doesn't work well because the powerful turning forces you generate going up the knoll will launch you way down the hill on a line like this.
Instead, extend as you make your edge change in the hollow before the bump, and then drop your hips to the inside so that they get lowest just on the far side of the knoll. With your skis getting further and further out from under your body as you go up the knoll, allow the knoll to lift them so that at the top of the knoll your hips are very close to the snow and your legs are almost parallel to the snow. With skis way out to the side, you have effectively absorbed the roll by halfway lying down parallel to it as you go over, a little like a high jumper going over a bar. You should have little trouble getting your skis down on the snow and arcing powerfully just below the crest. Watch the best racers run varied terrain courses and copy their movements. Understand the effects of terrain on how your skis act. Then experiment making turns over varied terrain so that you develop the experience needed to predict the effects of terrain when you inspect a course and react appropriately when you run it. Any well-trained recreational skier at speed can look ahead and plot his course while his body a second later executes the appropriate moves over the terrain that has already passed from view. When I think about it, the computation ability of the athletic brain in doing this is amazing. In racing, the challenge can be even greater because the layout of gates 3 or 4 gates ahead can affect the appropriate line for a gate that you're actually running. It would pay to train your brain computer to focus further ahead if you can. I'm convinced you can improve your line processing with some drills to force you to think ahead and look ahead. For instance, it can help to take runs through increasingly complex courses, focusing mainly on looking further and further ahead. Some race competition video games, in which it pays to look down the course and also to memorize layouts, might help. Another approach is to periodically run GS courses without previous inspection. This encourages you to look far ahead to figure out where to ski. Another approach is for your coach to tighten the offset of a gate between runs, so that you must read the course far ahead to spot and negotiate the changed section correctly. So far, I've deliberately avoided talking about timed runs. That's because up to a certain point, being timed creates added stress and a focus that can make it more difficult to learn technique. At first, looking at video that your coach took is evaluation enough. If you've followed my plan this far, though, you're now ready for a period of gate running where the prime focus is speed. In fact, trying to go fast can give you the subtleties that nothing else can give you. Get timed. Maybe even shut down your intellect for a time and just do whatever you sense might make you faster for a while. It could help a lot to run dual GS now, experimenting against a friend with straighter or lower lines, with tighter arcs, and pushing harder against your skis, or with getting your turns really clean, relying on what you feel. GS Gate Summary. Giant slalom skiing can supply you with all sorts of interesting and exciting challenges, from running mushrooms to improve your technique to creating a dramatic, timed, swooping dance down a complex and intellectually challenging course. There is an appropriate level of challenge for almost every skier. Even if you don't want to race, being forced to run somebody else's idea of a line, making tighter arcs than you thought you could make while looking ahead will do wonders for your skiing. Always remember, though, to learn it or teach it the easy, safe way, escalating challenges very gradually, mastering each challenge in order in the safest, least complex environment possible.
I've shown you a process for introducing someone to giant slalom gates. Now, after allowing Piero one day to become a giant slalom star, I'm ready to test him anew by introducing him to slalom gates. So far, he's accepted my instructional abuse gracefully and risen to one challenge after another. But this rapid advancement in slalom gates may be pushing him one step too far.
I wish it were true that once you know how to run GS gates, that it's a lot easier to learn to run slalom gates. It isn't easier at all. And the reason has to do with a critical difference between the types of gates themselves. Because GS gates don't flex much, most of a GS racer's body must go around a GS panel. A slalom skier has a lot more to learn to clear gates properly, because his angulating body must go through the flex pole. And it's important for him to learn to clear the pole correctly to minimize the forces of heavy impacts without undermining the rest of his technique. Slalom poles should be cleared primarily with your hands or arms, not by letting them just hit and bounce off your body or legs. It takes a smaller impact to flatten the pole with an arm strike high on the pole, where you have leverage against the spring, than if you strike it down low with the knee. The idea is to reduce the braking effect of pole clearing. Because of the centrifugal force generated in modern carved slalom, the pole usually comes to a powerful skier's outside hand, which must clear it and then pole plant. In the beginning, it takes training to learn this two-part move correctly. Inexperienced skiers often pick up bad rotating habits when learning to clear poles. Often they don't at first get their feet close enough to the poles nor develop big enough lean angles for the slalom pole to flow to their outside hand. The usual reaction then is to rotate the upper body to help the outside arm to reach across in front to clear the pole, rather than use an inside arm clear. Do that often enough and you have a bad habit that makes it difficult to hip angulate for powerful edging. To ski well, this racer's mental focus should be primarily on what's going on under his feet. Do you think that is where he is focused? To minimize the risk of developing these pole-clearing bad habits, I start a novice racer on an easy, regular rhythm course like this one, with moderately offset poles that lean out. Running this course, the racer doesn't need to worry a lot about getting his skis very close to the slalom pole bases, or even about getting big leg angles, because each turning pole comes more easily to his outside hand when the gates lean out. This allows him to focus more on clearing them and planting his pole. Before Piero ran the course, I explained to him that he should start by focusing on clearing the slalom pole with his outside hand and planting his ski pole with the same hand. In the first run, he cleared the poles with his outside hand nicely, but forgot to pole plant. The next run, I suggested that he use a wedge to get into the course slowly and to skid his turns so that he'd be going slow enough to figure out the clear plant rhythm for each hand. In this run, he began to get the clear plant move, but he had trouble figuring out what the angle of his left pole should be. Then I commented as follows.
Okay, Piero, that was a little difficult because of the snowplow, trying to figure it out. So you can either snowplow or skid it. But once again, focus on the hands and turn the poles out a little bit like this so it's easier to make the clear. and then try to get that plant after you do it. So it's bam, plant, bam, plant, bam, plant. Yeah, don't reach across. Let it come to you. Yeah. Bam, plant. Yes, good.
I was pleased to see Piero getting the required hand rhythm in his run and the proper left pole angle. However, I wanted him to get rid of his left hand's backstabbing pole plant before he focused on much else. So I said the following.
Okay, Piero, so that time you were getting the rhythm a lot better. It was beginning to click. I could see you just hitting the pole and getting your pole in. Make sure you don't do anything wild like this with your pole to plant. Just put it in at a slant about like that, and let it go, kind of, you know. Just a little, yeah, a little bit point forward. Certainly nothing like this, okay?
In his next run, he gets rid of the backstabbing movements, and once up to speed, he clears and plants for every turn. However, it's now obvious that we have to correct the way his left hand reaches across his body, creating rotation. Here are Piero and I in the same gait. The reason that the pole comes to my hand is that I'm carving a tighter arc using more body lean and hip angulation. This lean brings my outside hand right to the slalom pole without my having to reach for it. It also helps that my feet are closer to the base of the pole. To stop Piero from reaching, I tell him he needs to get his feet closer to the base of the poles and to angulate and carve more in his left foot turns. As Piero starts to pick up speed and to carve more aggressively, he has to reach for the poles less and less, and his clearing moves get better and better. After about 10 of these runs, his right foot turns are angulated and carving well, and the poles are coming to his right hand without reaching. The left foot turns have gotten much better, but are less consistent. He's still skidding a little, but he's beginning to groove in good pole clearing and planting skills. He should continue working to improve using this kind of leaned pole course until his left foot turns and pole clears are as good as his right foot ones. Then he should go back to focusing on the quality of his carving and developing big leg angles so that he never has to reach to clear leaner poles. Instead, we move him ahead right away, one last notch, to see what he does with regular straight-up poles. Predictably, when he first runs the vertical pole course, he has to rotate his upper body just a little to reach the poles, particularly in his left foot turns. Still, he's doing remarkably well for someone who has never run slalom gates before. I am rotating a bit to clear the poles myself, but I am really pleased by Piero's progress. It appears that in about a day of drills under pressure, Piero has just about overcome the most critical basic slalom challenges. I can't imagine daring to expose my learning process for the camera the way he did, but I think his real-life learning to race experiences provided for this video will be very useful to others. It's at this stage that after a review, Piero would need a lot of mileage in fairly simple, moderately pitched open gate courses, focusing on one aspect of course running at a time. It could be on his line, his stance, his gate clearing and pole planting, or his early big edging and firm outside leg. Whatever it takes to get his basic slalom technique correct, powerful, efficient, and fast. There's no point increasing the course challenge when you need to be able to focus on changing or grooving in basic movements. Furthermore, you need a period in which to develop your confidence.
When your basic slalom gate technique in open gates is pretty well grooved in, it's time to learn how to run the vertical combinations, flushes and hairpins.
I know from my own experience, if you go just a little too wide and round going into a flush, that you slow right down, because then all three of the flush turns must become at least as round as the first. You find yourself making large but quick body movements that are hard to control and increase the chance of a skid. On the other hand, if you go too straight and tight to the poles, you go fast, but it's easy to wind up coming out low and having to skid the usual tight open gates below. Here is how Ivica Kostelic handled one flat flush at the Olympics. Since he has to crank a pretty tight turn to get into the flush straight, he clears with his outside hand. For the second turn, he chooses to run a very straight line close to the poles. For this turn, he provides a small amount of knee angulation for the gentle turn involved, keeps his feet together, and stays over his skis. He must use an inside arm clear. After the last flush turn, the course is moderately tight. He gets as much direction as he can before the final turning poles, gets his feet out from under him and apart, and cranks out a hip-angulated turn. In other words, he uses two different types of turns to run this flush. A GS-type straight-legged, hip-angulated one for the powerful turns, and a very quick knee-angulated turn for the little gentle wiggle in the middle. His line is very accurate. In the first hairpin, he uses mixed hip and knee angulation turns, with a greater emphasis on hip angulation for the second, more powerful turn needed to get across the hill for the next gate. It takes years of practice to develop a flush technique like Ivica's. The way to start is to teach yourself inside arm clearing, either using very straight single pole courses or pro-style panel slalom courses like this one. As you see, inside arm clearing can be easier to learn than outside arm clearing, because one hand does the clearing while the other hand does the planting. I'm certainly not tempted to do an outside arm clear here in these gates. Do this for a while and you will groove in the movements for this kind of clear. To get ready to run flushes, free ski, practicing turning quicker and quicker. To be safe, be careful not to overdo the knee angulation in any turn that gets loaded up. Remember that some very quick flush turns involve very little edging. Practice these staying over your skis and using knee angulation. The next step is to do what these GMVS kids were doing when we were out at Mount Hood. Run flushes and hairpins linked by open gates over and over again, each time focusing on a specific move that needs work. It's in the quick combinations that it becomes important to keep your trunk stable and vertical, with just the legs working back and forth under you. The big body tilt turns that work well for some racers in open gates don't allow quick enough transitions in the quicker turns. When learning to run slalom or training, you should wear padding and other forms of protection to protect you from pole strikes and minimize damage from crashes. As this little sequence demonstrates, there are good reasons to wear a slalom helmet to protect your head and also to keep your goggles where they belong.
In each turn, you want to generate as much force as possible across and down the hill toward the next gate. On shaped skis, the effective force generated across the hill depends on how tight the arc is, its timing, and on the firmness of the loaded leg. Here, Ivica Kostelic's hips start low and move in and down quickly. He increases his edging by adding a little knee angulation. The forces pushing against his skis across the hill during his arc could be represented by this vector force curve. The resultant of these forces would more or less point straight sideways across the course. Ivica's smooth but quick big edging creates a well-bent ski and some big forces above the turning pole, as well as below, and his firm outside leg pushing against the arc quickly accelerates his body into the new direction. If he had started the edging weakly and contracted his outside leg in the early part of the turn to absorb the landing, the top of the turn would have been weaker, and he would have had to pressure the ski more at the bottom of the turn to complete the direction change. His arc and the forces pushing against the arc might have looked more like this. The resultant of the forces would point more uphill and would amount to braking. My conclusion is that on the flat, it pays to be very firm on the outside ski right from the top of each turn. On steeper, more offset courses, maximum pressure must be delayed.
As terrain steepens, the slalom challenge changes. Flat slalom requires very clean, fully carved, accurate turns and acceleration from firm, early pushes against the skis. Steeper pitched courses are usually more offset to control speed, and they require more ski bend, tighter arcs, getting in over the poles more with hips close to the snow, and more direction at each gate. Pole plants start to become more important. You might think that with the 150 to 160 centimeter big side cut slalom skis they use, that the best racers fully carve every slalom turn, even steep ones. However, very steep courses are usually very offset. They look something like this. Could this course be run using fully carved turns? Maybe, but the racer would have to follow a very round line that would almost have to go uphill between gates like this. That is not what the top racers do, because this line is too long and turns too far out of the fall line to be fast. What do top racers do instead? They ski this line. Coming out of a turn, they extend upward and pull their skis up under them to float just above the snow. They allow gravity to pull their upper bodies down, forward, and in toward the next gate, while they extend their legs out to the side and pivot their skis into the turn. They land on well-edged skis that are more or less in the fall line. The skis bend into an arc and complete the turn. The arc must be ended fairly quickly to avoid an overturning skid going into the traverse. The combination of very large centrifugal turning force and gravity toward the bottom of the turn makes the ski's grip on the snow a little tenuous, and avoiding excessive tip pressure here helps keep the skis carving. This technique is not enormously different from what racers used to do on longer skis. The main difference is that the carving phase starts a little higher in the turn than it used to, and the leg angles are greater than ever during the carving phase. This turn works because during the pivot phase there's very little pressure on the skis, creating only minimal friction from the icy slalom course surface. Any skidding that takes place happens high in the turn, and as the ski carves into the steep fall line, speed is quickly regained. The center of mass of the skier follows a steeper, straighter, tighter line than it would when the skier skis the fully carved round arc path. Having it in mind that one of the biggest problems with racers of all ability levels is getting forward enough, several of my coaching friends seem to be telling their racers to stay way forward all the time. Is this right? In order for a racer to stay centered over the turning forces generated by his shaped skis when carving a tight arc, his body has to swing like a pendulum. As you see, there's a distinct forward-to-back flow in the carving phase of each turn here. But Ivica makes sure to get forward again for each turn. Every Olympic slalom medal winner on this course came out of his turns looking like this. On the steep, this forward-to-back flow was even more pronounced. Forward, back, forward, back, forward. I don't believe in encouraging racers to be continually forward. I believe that getting forward after every turn to be ready to carve the next turn is critical. To prepare for these, first free ski a lot on steep pitches, trying to carve every turn in a slalom rhythm. Be sure to include brief bursts of very quick flush style turns. Try to figure just how tight a carve you can make. If the pitch is very steep, you may not be able to carve without gaining too much speed to stay in a slalom course. If you can't keep your speed under control, then start to practice making very back and forth turns, with some extension, pivoting, and firm pole plants for the steepest parts. When you can go sufficiently back and forth on the steep to keep your speed under control, and still mostly carve each turn without big checks, then you're ready to ski steep gates. Your first steep course should be simple back and forth gates. This will help develop your ability to pole plant, extend up and pivot, and get direction. At first, it's not easy to sustain a series of carved turns and gates on the steep because of the physical and mental demands. Ideally, the early courses should be fairly short. By now you understand what good steep slalom skiing is. You know what to alternately focus on from studying Ivica's steep skiing. You know how to start with simple challenges and gradually increase them. Slalom ruts. The same principles apply as in GS, but everything happens much quicker. Much of the terrain you run in slalom is in the form of ruts. The snow gets carved out at each gate, and then it sometimes gets piled up between gates. There is often a lip at the end of a rut which may launch you. Here you can see this racer extend going up the lip right until his heels leave the snow. He flies. Here is how another racer took this gate. He edges and pressures his ski hard to change his direction quickly and early. The turn is almost done, and he's starting to extend upward from the middle of the rut. Extension is complete. He contracts to minimize the launch, hunching forward. During a short flight, his legs extend to place his skis in the top of the next rut. This is very nice rut running. For the racer who tends to get launched, learning to run correctly may seem impossible. But the problem can be reduced to a simple matter of timing. He needs to edge and pressure earlier, and then extend earlier, and then relax and contract earlier. For each rutted course, there's a rhythm of pressure and release of pressure, which gives you power but minimizes flight time. Many coaches say that the key to running ruts is to be loose and relaxed. I feel that's a prescription for getting thrown around like a rag doll. You need to be proactive, pushing feet down and pulling feet up in the right rhythm. At least in the first run of a slalom race, the ruts you must run are created by better ranked racers skiing in better conditions. To run them effectively, you must take the same fast line as they did, with roughly the same timing. That is not only the fastest line, but it's also often the easiest line. In relation to giant slalom, I mentioned the importance of creating a period where you learn primarily by getting timed and just trying to go fast. Since a significant part of slalom speed comes from quickness, explosiveness, and risky lines, this speed-focused period is doubly important for slalom training. If you already know how to make clean turns, you can often get yourself skiing faster just by picking up the beat, pushing against the snow smoothly but harder and quicker. For that reason, it's important to warm yourself up substantially before you race, so that you feel warm, quick, and explosive. This video is about technique, not psychology. Still, in slalom, technique and results respond to attitude. And attitude must be reality-based. One reality is that most racers fall or make a major mistake in at least 30% of their slalom races. Not necessarily because they didn't prepare correctly, but because human reactions and snow can be flaky. If you don't perform well at a race, look for the reasons. Put the mistake behind you quickly and keep training according to plan. Mistakes will gradually become more rare. The most critical reality that affects attitude and results is the quality of your training. Have you learned the critical moves thoroughly so that you make them automatically? Have you given yourself all of the experiences you need to approach any racing situation, having faced it before in training? Have you run terrain, ruts, and courses that are more challenging than anything that might be put in front of you at a race? There's nothing like getting into the starting gate knowing that you have done it all in practice and done it at high speed.
Of course, most of the viewers I'm trying to reach aren't aimed at World Cup stardom or even to coach somebody toward it. I produced this video product primarily to try to show athletic skiers how easy and how much fun it could be to improve their skiing by climbing a rung or two of the carved turn ladder. You don't have to climb far to experience an incredible transformation in your skiing, regardless of how you ultimately want to be able to ski. Of course, if that experience excites you, you can always climb to the next rung and the next, and then run a few gates and find a program and move to Vermont. I've found that obsession isn't always a bad thing. Thanks for watching my video, and good luck.